Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is a presentation of a program offered by the New York State Office of Parks, Rec, and Historic Preservation. And it is, the topic is historic homeownership, rehabilitation tax credits. So I think it's something that a lot of people are unaware of, and we're hoping to inform them this evening. I would like to introduce our host, Erin Tobin. She is the new executive director of Adirondack Architectural Heritage, AARCH, and Erin will run the presentation tonight.
Thank you so much, Teresa. It's a pleasure to be here virtually with everybody. And as Teresa said, I'm the new executive director at Adirondack Architectural Heritage, coming up on my 6-month anniversary. And tonight you're going to, and I just wanted to say thank you to Teresa and Warrensburgh Beautification and the Village of Warrensburg and the Warrensburg Historical Society for making this program happen. And we're a little bit of a hybrid situation tonight because I believe that there are people at the library, at the Warrensburg Library here, where Teresa is
Yes.
manning the computer at the library. So welcome to all of you who I can't see at the library. I wanted to just share very quickly a couple of slides about AARCH, Adirondack Architectural Heritage. And I'm sure, and I hope that most of you are familiar with us. Adirondack Architectural Heritage was founded in 1990 with the mission of preserving the architecture and communities of the Adirondacks and surrounding region through education, action, and advocacy. We're a membership-based organization that fulfills our mission through our pillars of education, advocacy, partnerships, technical assistance, and fee-for-service work within communities that are seeking to bring preservation more fully into their economic development strategy, like Warrensburg tonight, creating economic development through historic tax credits and historic preservation. And hopefully all of you here tonight are members of AARCH and support the Warrensburg Historical Society and Warrensburg Beautification. If you're not, please consider joining us. AARCH was founded in part to support the preservation of Adirondack landmarks like Great Camp Santanoni, where we've worked for over the last 30 years, supporting restoration, interpretation, preservation training through internships, and community collaboration through partnership with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, the town of Newcomb, and a dedicated friends group. Camp Santanoni is open year-round, and you can get there by foot, bicycle, ski, or snowshoe along a 5-mile carriage road. And we just completed our largest restoration project at Camp Santanoni to date. We also complete historic cultural resource surveys throughout the North Country, such as National Register Historic District nominations, and here's Malone. These survey and nomination projects open up preservation funding opportunities like the one we're going to talk about tonight. Grants, historic tax credits, creating jobs, and supporting economic development. And of course, preservation isn't just about buildings, but looking at how the environment, including structures and landscapes, reflect human history and define a sense of place. These places here represent more than just architecture, but are shared stories and reflect places that have community meaning. And that's really, I'll stop my share, but that's really what we're about tonight, that it's historic preservation as economic development, as creating a sense of place, as creating community pride, and really investment in our homes and your homes. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Francis, Historic Site Restoration Coordinator for the New York State Historic Preservation Office. And we will have question and answers. If you have questions, type them into the chat or into the Q&A, and we will collect them. And following her presentation, we will have some question and answers And then you'll hear from Manu Davidson, who is a homeowner and a neighbor in Warrensburg who has used the historic tax credit program, and she will talk about her experiences. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. You can hear and see me okay? Is this working? Okay, good. I'm getting some nods. So I'm Fran. I'm with the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the tax credit program, how it works, how to submit an application, and I'm also here to answer any questions. There are a bunch of us on staff at SHPO in the homeowner tax credit unit, and we really enjoy this part of our jobs because it enables us to help homeowners and interact with homeowners around the state. And we have a lot of really special historic districts in New York State, like the one in Warrensburg. So I hope that this presentation gets you excited about applying for this program potentially, or at least if you want to ask us some questions and talk more with us about an application, we're always happy to entertain that. So, so the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation is a state agency. We provide safe and enjoyable recreational and educational opportunities for all New Yorkers. We are the stewards of valuable natural resources as well as historic and cultural resources. So kind of to echo what Erin was saying earlier, we do think a lot about the intersection of the natural world and cultural resources. Within OPRHP is the New York State Historic Preservation Office, which offers programs and services that help individuals and communities achieve the social, economic, and environmental benefits associated with historic preservation. So we offer a number of different programs, including the homeowner tax credit program. So the historic homeownership rehabilitation credit program is for private property owners who live in historic homes. It is a program where you can claim up to 20% of the cost of qualified rehabilitation expenditures on your house, up to $50,000 in credit per taxable year. It's a credit that's applied to your New York State income taxes, not your property taxes. So that's something to note. In order to apply for the program and claim the credit, you have to spend at least $5,000 and do at least 5% of the work on the exterior. And right now we know that the program is authorized through December 31st, 2024. The credit is offered in accordance with New York State Consolidated Tax Law. Our office reviews the applications in terms of the actual work that you'll be performing on your property. But in order to actually claim the credit, once we review and approve all of the work, you need to file a claim with New York State Tax and Finance in order to actually get the credit. The program is available for New York State taxpayers. In order to qualify, the building in question, so your home, has to be listed on the state and national registers of historic places, either individually or in a historic district, like the historic district that's in Warrensburg. It also has to be located in a qualifying census tract, but we have many areas in upstate New York that fall within qualifying census tracts, and that's a separate determination that's made by the Census Bureau that says that the folks in that area qualify to take a tax credit. And all of Warrensburg is in a qualifying census tract. So if you're in a historic district and you're in Warrensburg, then you would qualify for this program. So in order to apply and do an application, you have to submit an application and have it approved before the work begins. We aren't able to credit or approve anything that's happened retroactively. But the rare exception to this example is if you're having an emergency situation. So if it's springtime and it starts raining and you notice that your roof is leaking and you'd like to apply for a tax credit to do roof repairs or a roof replacement, but it's really more like an emergency situation, then we would encourage you to reach out to our office to speak with us about that, because approvals can take up to 30 days. But we certainly wouldn't want your health and safety to be jeopardized when thinking about a rehabilitation project. So we'd ask you to contact us. Right now, the primary applications are submitted via hard copy. So there's forms available on our website. I believe Teresa also has copies of the forms. They have to be submitted as hard copies, but we are working on a totally electronic process. So this can be done eventually on our website. There is a review fee for our office that is associated with the application for some applicants based on your amount of income. It's $25 always for the first 2 parts. And then the third part includes a sliding scale review fee. And then ultimately, you can go ahead and claim the credit when your work is finished, but it doesn't have to be in the same year that you start the application. So if you start an application in 2022 and you're doing a whole bunch of rehabilitation work items, but you're not going to be finished until 2023, that's okay. You can claim the credit altogether in 2023. You can also apply every year if you meet the minimum criteria. So there's a lot of different work that qualifies. We have an instructions document that lists some of these work items that qualify, but also if you have specific questions or you want to talk through a project at your house, we're always happy to do that. So some work items that qualify include things like structural systems, so foundations, roofs, floors, attic and ceilings. We see a lot of roof work with this program, especially this time of year as things are warming up and people are getting busy doing different work. Can also include things like exterior painting or exterior wall repair. We also see a lot of chimney repointing with this program. And we also see a lot of rehabilitation projects done on porches or stoops. If you have historic windows, we will encourage you to restore them, but also if windows are deteriorated beyond repair, there are some acceptable replacements, but that's something that you talk through with your reviewer. There's a whole bunch of interior work items that qualify as well, like floors, walls, stairs, ceilings, trim, and paint, building systems, so any kind of mechanical, electrical, or plumbing work, insulation and weatherproofing, installation of solar panels, and things like new kitchens and bathrooms, with the exception of appliances or decor or any furnishings that can be removed. But if you're making permanent repairs and upgrades to your home, chances are they will likely qualify for the program. And you don't have to go back in time and make a historic kitchen. You can have a completely brand new and modern kitchen with many expenditures that will qualify for the program. In certain areas of the state, we see a lot of applications for solar panels, particularly in New York City. Solar panels are a qualifying expenditure for the tax credit, but they shouldn't be visible from a principal elevation or where the public can generally see them. So if you're thinking about doing a solar project and you know that the panels or the arrays are not going to be visible, or they'll be in the back or stored offsite somewhere, then that most likely will qualify. There are some things for the program that don't qualify. And certainly if we receive an application from you and we have some questions about it, or there's certain work items that won't qualify, we'll definitely talk to you about it. So things that can be removed if you were to move and leave your home. So appliances like stoves, refrigerators, washers and dryers, unfortunately, those don't qualify. Any work that's performed outside the building footprint, such as landscaping, paving, fencing, or work on detached outbuildings. Unfortunately, we get a lot of questions about detached garages, and we can't accept work items performed on those structures. And work that doesn't meet the Secretary of the Interior standards also will not qualify for the program. And what I mean by that are the Secretary of the Interior standards are the standards that we use to evaluate these applications. There are 10 standards, and essentially the standards state that you should retain existing historic materials, you should repair damaged historic materials, and that you should only replace materials if they're deteriorated beyond repair and in kind. So a good example of this would be if you have some wooden clapboard siding that's a little rotted and you're working on an exterior painting project, but there's some areas of the siding that need to be replaced because they're rotted, they're deteriorated beyond repair. We would ask you to replace in kind with wood, just like the original, as opposed to using a modern material or covering with vinyl siding or a different type of siding. This program is also available if you occupy part of your property, but you have a rental unit in your other part of the property. You can only claim a portion of the credit, and we can talk through with you individually how to calculate how much credit you'll take. But oftentimes in some of the larger cities in New York, we'll see applications from folks that maybe have a rental unit, they have 2 rental units, or they have an income producing component, like they use a home office. Generally, whatever you put on your tax credit application to us should match what you put on your taxes. And so then what this means is that in any exterior or shared spaces, you can claim credit for only a portion of it, but you can claim 100% of the cost for the work of the done, or 100% of the sorry, you can claim 100% of the total costs of the work that you do on the inside of your living space. New York State also has a commercial tax credit program that's totally for income producing properties. There also is a federal commercial tax credit program. It is a little bit similar to the homeowner credit program, but it has some major differences in how the threshold expenditures are calculated. The property also has to be used for a commercial or an income producing proper purpose. Again, the standards, the project has to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. In order to use the New York State commercial tax credit, you have to be taking the federal credit as well. There's a completely different set of reviewers in our office who review these projects. And if you'd like some more information on that, because you might have a qualifying building, certainly we can get that information to you. So this is what the application looks like for the homeowner credit program. Parts 1 and 2 are submitted together. Part 1 establishes that the property is listed on the National Register. Part 2 is the description of work. So the beginning part of the form just asks for your name and address. There's a project checklist here. We'll ask whether or not the home has an income producing component, the total estimated project cost, and then certainly you have to sign it so we can have that on file. It also has a checklist so that you can make sure that you're submitting all the components that are required, like photographs and floor plans, if applicable. The part 2 is really comprised of a worksheet that looks like this, and it's where you describe the work that you're going to be doing on your home and the estimated cost. And the really cool thing about this is, and people ask me all the time, if we need to have formal estimates from contractors, and we don't. So if it's the beginning of the spring and you're thinking about repainting or replacing your roof, but you haven't actually contacted a contractor yet, you can go ahead and submit a tax credit application to us at any time, and you can estimate the cost yourself. The only time that it's really necessary that we have exact figures of how much money you spent is when you're all done and you're ready to submit a part 3 certificate of completion application. So the description on the scope of work is really simple. We will ask for a photo, the title of the work, the existing condition, which you can just say deteriorated asphalt roof needs a replacement, and the proposed work is just to replace it, and then the estimated cost. So this does not have to be filled out by a professional, an architect, an engineer, anybody like that. This is something that you can absolutely do on your own. And we really aim to make it as easy as possible. You don't have to be overly descriptive. But again, if we have questions about some of the work items that you're proposing, we will reach out to you individually to talk about it. If you submit an application to our office and it's approved and you begin working on your project, but then suddenly you discover that you have loads more work items that you'd like to do, you can actually add to your application at any time. We have these amendment sheets. They can be submitted really easily. When you get a part 1 and 2 approval letter, it will have your project number on it. And so then we can add any additional work items or make major changes to your existing application very easily. When you're all done with your project and you're ready to actually claim your tax credit, that's when we'll ask you to submit a part 3. And the part 3 application mirrors the part 1 and 2 almost exactly. So if you hang on to the forms that you have, you can simply fill them out and say, I said that I was going to redo my roof. Now here I am, I've redone my roof. This is how much it cost. So the part 3 is basically where you describe everything that you did, and we verify that you did everything that you said you were going to, and that it was completed according to historic standards. We ask for folks to submit part 3 applications to us in December, usually by December 1st, because it takes us sometimes up to 30 days to review them. And if you're looking to claim credit for your taxes in that year, we need to go ahead and issue a certificate of completion by the end of that calendar year. So that is something to keep in mind. So definitely breezed through that. So I know that there's probably a whole bunch of questions.
So if you want to put some questions in the chat or Q&A, there was a question in the Q&A asking whether about the Warrensburg Historic District, and does it count as being on the historic register if it's within the historic district? And so
that's a really good question. Yes, the program is definitely open to homes that are contributing to the Warrensburg Historic District. So it doesn't have to be individually listed on the register. It can just be a contributing structure to the district.
excellent. And then there's another question that says, is there a time constraint for doing the project once you submit the worksheet? And does each project have to be done by the same contractor?
Those are awesome questions. I really like those questions. No. So the awesome thing about this program is that it's designed to be really, really flexible for you and your situation. So you do not have to finish all of the work within one calendar year. You can start an application this year and you can finish it next year, 2 years from now. I have folks currently that are submitting part 3s, and maybe they first applied in 2020, back in 2020, and are just finishing some of the work right now. You also don't have to submit separate applications for every single work item that you're going to do. So if you are planning a big rehab project and you know that it's going to include a kitchen renovation as well as porch rehabilitation, and a whole bunch of other things, you can put those all on the same form. They don't have to be completed by the same contractor at all, and you can do it in a time frame that makes sense to you. The only time frame thing to keep in mind is that if you want to claim the tax credit for a specific calendar year, then it's important to make sure that the work is done and that you've submitted all the paperwork to our office in December. So that we have time to issue a certificate of completion for that year. So I've had some folks reach out recently and say, hey, I'm just finishing up my taxes for 2021. Here's my part 3, but it's already 2022. I wasn't able to help those people. They won't lose out on the opportunity to claim the credit. They'll just have to wait until they do their taxes for this year in order to do it.
And then the 2 contractor questions. Can a homeowner use multiple contractors for their historic tax credit project? And do those contractors have to be licensed?
You can use any contractor that you choose. It doesn't have to be someone who specializes in historic preservation, but depending on the project, we certainly would recommend that you work with someone who specializes in historic preservation, especially if there's a condition around one of the work items. So for example, on masonry projects, a lot will say that the masonry repointing has to be done in a historically sensitive manner that matches the historic mortar. And not all masonry contractors are interested in using historic masonry practices. So that's something where it might benefit you to do a little bit of research and find someone who specializes in that type of work. But if you're redoing a bathroom, any plumber that you feel comfortable with, or any kitchen contractor that you feel comfortable with for a kitchen project, certainly is a good idea. You can also claim the credit if you plan on doing some of the work yourself, but the only thing with that is that you can't actually claim credit for the cost of your labor. You can only claim the credit for the cost of your materials if you're doing a DIY project. So if you decide that you're going to repaint all of your bedrooms, but you don't want to hire someone to do that, you can claim credit for the cost of the paint, but not all of the time and labor that you spend painting. So hopefully that makes sense.
There's a question about residential versus commercial zoned home. Is there a difference in tax credit variance for residential versus commercially zoned home? And I'm gonna, I guess, ask for a little clarification on that, because is the question whether it is a house that you live in versus a house that you rent, or are you asking regarding the zoning? And Fran, maybe you can kind of answer both questions.
Yeah, so my answer to that would be that you have to, in order to use this program, you do have to live in the home that you're applying for the credit for. It has to be your residence, whether it's your residence that you live in year round. If it's a residence that you live in part of the year, that's also fine, but it can't be rented or used as an Airbnb or anything like that. And if you live in part of your home, but you rent part of your home, you can technically still use the credit. We'll just calculate some of your expenditures and what you can be credited for a little bit differently. But when we say commercial in regards to the commercial tax credit program, we mean an income producing property. So something like a storefront or some other kind of business. But the homeowner program requires that the structures be owner occupied. So hopefully that helps.
And he just clarified, he says he lives in the home, but it's zoned commercial. And I'm just going to say, I think that if you live in the home and you live in 100% of the home, what your zoning is really between you and your local zoning officer. And if they allow you to live in your home, regardless of the zoning, that's different, because this program is about the actual use, not the zoning, if that helps. There's one other question about whether your office provides names of reliable contractors.
So unfortunately, as a state agency, we can't provide recommendations for contractors. I also can't recommend specific products, like specific brand name products. I can certainly give guidance on different types of projects and materials, but if you're having trouble finding a contractor, I don't know, maybe AARCH would be able to assist, but also maybe the Warrensburgh Historical Society or some other groups. But Also talking to your neighbors. If anyone's done a really cool project that you're really interested in, that's often a really good way to find a contractor.
Yes, and I'll second that. We can make some recommendations at AARCH. We don't maintain a list, but we have some recommendations that we can provide as a nonprofit. We have a little more flexibility there. And then I think this might be the last question, is whether a homeowner can ask SHPO to qualify a house for a home for this program, qualify a house as historic. And I think this might mean, you know, can they list the house on the National Register so that it qualifies?
So if you have questions about that, we would direct you to the relevant staff person in our office who takes care of the National Register program for the county that you're in. It's a completely separate program that has completely separate requirements, even though National Register listing is a qualification for using this tax credit program. But if you're concerned about eligibility or whether or not your home is listed, we can certainly look that information up really easily and then give some next steps and guidance on what to do if it's not.
Great. Well, I think that's a really good segue to Manu Davidson's presentation. To talk about your experience with the historic homeowner tax credit.
Thank you, Erin and Teresa and Francis, for inviting me to this presentation. I'm really excited about being able to share a little bit of my journey through historic homeownership. I just want to make sure that you can see my shared screen and that my sound quality is clear for those dialing into today's program. So I have the privilege of owning a beautiful historic home in Warrensburg. I bought her about 5 or 6 years ago, and I knew going into the program, into the house, that it takes some fortitude to own an old home for a variety of reasons, but she has great bones and I love her. And I have had a lot of fun trying to bring her back to her former glory. I was fortunate in that the house itself was in relatively good condition, even though it had not been occupied for probably about 10 years, maybe a little bit longer. So it was empty when I bought it, and it was a little sad, but she's coming back to life, and I'm so happy about that. I learned about this program last fall when this beauty in Warrensburg received an award through the Warrensburgh Beautification Society, a program for its preservation. And this is the Cornerstone bed and breakfast, a Victorian bed and breakfast in Warrensburg. It's beautiful. It's my dream house. But during this presentation, AARCH also had given a presentation about the credit that we're talking about today, and my head almost exploded because I didn't know that my house might qualify. Literally the next day, I reached out to SHPO and got some information and just started the process. I was eventually, contacted with my reviewer. He was super, extremely patient with all the questions that I had, but ultimately he got me on the right track. And at this point in time, I had been in the middle of doing a lot of the work. So we had talked about how I can try to recapture some of the work that's been in progress at the time that I submitted my application. So just a little bit of background. I am an attorney. I handle real estate matters. I know nothing about construction. I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. I have no formal training in any of these things that we're talking about today, other than my own personal experiences as a homeowner. So I submitted the application, and it was pretty rudimentary, to say the least. One of the things that I wanted to share with people on this program today is, I think, the simplicity of the application process. Not only because the application itself is pretty straightforward, there's also, you know, great communication between the reviewer who was assigned to my particular project. And so, if you can see my screen, one of the projects that I had applied for was foundational work, stopping the water intrusion into the basement, trying to do some waterproofing, replacing my Bilco doors. And so it asked for drawings. This is my drawing, 8 by 11 piece of scrap paper, graph paper, which sort of shows what I was working on, or at least my contractors were trying to help me do. And lo and behold, that particular part of the application was approved. I did provide some pictures, and you'll see that this is what I was working on, and we're still working on it. But this is the first part of the application process, just some of the before pictures in terms of what was happening at the time of this submission. And you'll see that these are black and whites, but the house itself was in its current, it was in its condition, and it needed some love, to say the least. And so these are some before and after pictures of the work that I was doing. The floors were painted. And when the floors are replaced, you see this beautiful white old pine floor, which is part of the, which is now my office. I installed a built-in to help support the chimney that's behind this built-in shelving. I converted what I think used to be part of a coal room into a laundry room. And you'll see that the before pictures, the floors were dirt floors. Raccoons even lived in here, and now my laundry equipment does. This is the before and after for the Bilco work. The tin roofs were replaced over the porches. Old varnish was removed from the floors. Stained floors were resurfaced and refinished. So, you know, the tax credit is super for anybody who is interested in working on their home, improving their home. If it qualifies, the worst that can happen is that the application is denied. The best that can happen is that you get a credit for some of the work that you've put into the home, and that you can use it in the future for future projects. I am also a member of the Warrensburgh Historical Society. It was founded in 1973 to protect and provide historical information to our residents and visitors in the community. I hope that anybody who is interested in Warrensburg's history and is interested in joining the organization or supporting it, that they check out our website and join. I'd be remiss as a board member not to ask for your support. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them now.
I'm putting the Warrensburg Historical Society website in the chat for the attendees. And attendees, if you scroll up, you'll see the State Historic Preservation Office website information that I put up there. There's a question about what's involved with being a member, presumably of the Historical Society.
If you want to become a member, it's really what you want to make of it. It's a small annual fee as either an individual, a business owner, and there are other qualifying categories for that. You have the opportunity to participate in any of the functions that are organized by the society throughout the year, and also to run for board membership if you're so inclined.
Well, Teresa, are there any in-person questions in the library?
Did you say something? I couldn't hear you.
Are there any in-person questions at the people who are gathered at the library?
Yeah. Do we have any questions? No. Liz?
I think she covered it, but I couldn't hear things.
Okay, yeah, it was kind of choppy, unfortunately, but is there a list of available house painters certified to remove lead-based paint?
I can go ahead.
This ties into what we were talking about earlier about contractors. I can't make recommendations for contractors, unfortunately, but that would be something I would talk to folks in the area to see if anyone has any recommendations.
And AARCH is available as a resource if you wanted to call. We don't have a list of painters, but at least I don't have a list of painters, but try us because my colleagues may, and it's worth contacting our office. I just put our website in the chat.
Okay, so did you?
Yeah, I understood most of it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we're just having a little trouble here hearing because things are kind of like coming and going with the sound. But so AARCH does have some type of list as far as painters that would be qualified to remove lead-based paint?
We do not have a contractor list, but we may know of somebody. And when I say we, I mean one of my colleagues may know of somebody who might be able to make a recommendation. So I would recommend contacting Christine Bush in our office for our preservation services.
Okay, so
She recommends that you contact Christine Welch. That is one of their staff members.
Bush, I think, Christine Bush, right?
Yes.
So it's Christine Bush, okay.
Yes.
Okay,
And I
so-
put our website in the chat and you can get our contact information there too.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I can share that. I can share that with the person in the room with Liz who was asking that question.
Okay.
And she can contact Christine directly.
Okay. We have a couple of questions in the chat that have come up. One is about a second home. Francis, if you want to answer that one.
So you can apply for the tax credit if it is a second home. It just can't be a second home that is rented. If it's a second home that you occupy for a portion of the year and it's still for use as one of your primary residences, then you can definitely still apply. And we see that from time to time in some communities around New York where there are historic districts, but they're mostly, summer homes.
There's a question about whether the tax credits can be spread out over a few years, or do you need to take them at a single time?
So if you meet the minimum threshold criteria, which is spending at least $5,000 and doing at least 5% of the work on the exterior, if you intend to meet that criteria every single year, you can apply for the credit every single year. But if you are intending to do a little bit of exterior work, but a lot of interior work, and maybe you'd prefer to do a whole series of projects and then take the credit all at once, you also have the option to do that. If your adjusted gross income is above $60,000, then what will end up happening is the credit will be applied to your income tax bill, but then the remainder will be credited towards your income tax bill in future years until it's used up. If your income is below $60,000, it'll be credited towards your tax bill, and then you'll take the rest of it as a refund, which is just there's a New York State tax and finance differentiation for how the credit is taken depending on your income. So that's why the form will ask for that information.
I have a question about spreading out the credit over a number of years. If your adjusted gross income is above $60,000, but you won't use it in a year, is there a cap on that, or is it really just spread out and, you know, could be spread out for any number of years until it's
Yeah,
done?
I believe that it's carried over until it's totally used up.
Right. And then the last question I see here is somebody is outside the district by about a block. What should they do? What process should they follow?
In that case, I would gladly connect you with the National Register person to see if there's any potential for boundary expansion. I'm not sure. Because again, that would be that totally separate program, but it's something that we're happy to look into and see if it's possible.
Great. I see somebody has a question. All right, Mr. Larkin.
How does a building contribute to the district? If it's not on the historic, it looks like somebody understands. Fran understands what I'm asking.
I do, yeah, because I saw your question in the Q&A box, and I was typing you an answer while Manu was speaking, but this is really good that we can talk about this for everybody. So within a historic district, there are homes, there are buildings that are contributing to that district, and then there may be some structures that are non-contributing to that district. So if there's a historic district that is composed of, you know, mostly 1800s Victorian homes, any home that falls within the characteristics of what that district is listed for is likely to be contributing, versus if there was something like a 1970s gas station, it wouldn't be contributing to the significance of that district that largely is about Victorian homes. So, and when we receive these homeowner tax credit applications with your name and your property address, we look up every single home individually, and our National Register staff verifies that it's contributing to the district. But if you're concerned about that, or you want us to look up information about your home's historic status before you apply, you can always call or email us and we can clarify that, you know, well before you submit an application. So we're happy to do that.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Also, I'd like to add that in Warrensburg, when we were doing the National Register work, we also have a list of individual properties that were potentially eligible. And the reason that they weren't, for the most part, included in the district, it was because of the lack of being able to connect them physically with the boundaries of the district. But we have 23 of these eligible properties that I'm trying to share information with the current owners, so they would know that they could actually, I believe, participate in this program while they were working on having the property actually listed on the register. I think that's correct, Francis?
So if something is eligible for listing in the register, technically we can accept a Part 1 and 2 application, but we'd also expect that there would be a nomination for that property in progress. Because then ultimately we wouldn't be able to issue a Part 3 certificate of completion until it's actually listed on the register. So we have this come up sometimes where maybe there's a new district that's coming forward before a state review board meeting, but it's not calendared for a couple months. But people want to start working, they can apply for the tax credit program with the expectation that they can't finish their application until the district is listed. But if it's the kind of thing where there's no nomination in process yet, the property is merely determined eligible, that would be something we'd want to talk to the homeowner specifically about, just to make sure that there will be something in process, because we'd want to make sure that ultimately everything would go through and that you can claim the credit. So we'd want to prevent any kind of miscommunication beforehand.
Right, right. So as long as they're aware that they would need to complete the process, then and they would have the information that we have that determined that it was potentially eligible, which they could use, to move forward with the nomination. But just wanted to encourage those that whose properties just weren't within the boundaries of the district, but were still, significantly historic, that there were other opportunities that they could pursue. And then there's the question that our district was created in the 90s. And we were listed in 2000 and 2001, but since that's, quite a long time ago now, there may be other buildings that weren't, 50 years old at that point that also might qualify. I'm just assuming, that that's something that might also be considered if people are wondering about the potential of their properties being, being eligible.
Yeah, that would be something that I would recommend. Maybe AARCH can give some assistance here in terms of thinking about an updated survey, community survey, or possibly a National Register boundary expansion project, because the homeowners who have homes who are not currently listed should definitely understand that National Register listing and the process for being listed on the National Register is a totally separate and sometimes very intensive process, especially for districts. And so if a homeowner were going to complete an individual nomination, there would still be a lot of work and research that has to go into that. And we really do want to keep National Register designation separate from the tax credit program, because they are two separate programs, even though one is a qualifier for the other. So if someone is eligible but not listed, I think we really want to work with that person to give them some assistance, so that we make sure that they're not putting the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse, so to speak. As
I mentioned at the beginning, one of the things that we do is work with communities on cultural research surveys and National Register designations. So that's something we can absolutely assist with. We have two hands raised. I'm going to invite Mr. Randall to ask a question.
One of the slides in the middle of your presentation said over 2.5 and under $3.5, but what was that? Just a $sign, 2.5, $sign, 3.5. What was that referring to, and what was the real amount of that? Was it 2.5 million or 2.5 thousand or what?
I believe that here, I'm going to
Just go back to one of the prior, in the middle of your presentation, Fran.
was it, yeah, so it was this one.
Let me look. Yeah, state credit is 20% for projects over $2.5 and 30% for projects under $2.5.
That there should be after that. This slide's talking about the commercial tax credit programs, there's a federal commercial tax credit program as well as state commercial tax credit program. These are for much bigger projects that are for income producing properties. And
I'm just saying that the amounts there say $2.5 and $3.5. What
Right,
is
it's-
it? 2.5 million or what?
yes, it's million. So
Okay.
that's a typo on this slide. The purpose of me putting in this slide about the commercial tax credits was just to let folks know that this exists.
Okay, great.
What I also should have said earlier is that anyone who's attended this presentation this evening will get a copy of these slides, because I know that this one in particular has a lot of information on it. We also have way more information on our website about the differences between the homeowner and the commercial tax credit programs. And we'll make sure that we get you, I think Erin put the link to our website in the chat box, but we can make sure that we get you that information.
Great, thank you. One more question. How many people are listening in today on this? How many people are tuned into this? Does the administrator know? I'm with the newspaper, so I'm interested in how many people are watching.
We had 20 on the webinar, and now we have 15. So
You had 20 at the max? Okay, thank you.
thank you.
So there was a question for me concerning the tax credit. I'm undergoing, the house is still undergoing lots of work. During the context of my initial application process, I did submit amendments. That application has been closed, and so I took the tax credit for last year on this year's taxes. For the work taken last year for this year's taxes. In the context of my submissions there, I also had applied for work that I was hoping would get done during the course of the application period, but we just couldn't get to it. So I obviously didn't apply for that part of the credit because the work wasn't completed. I'll just be submitting a new application for new work, you know, in the coming months as I get prepared to start doing other work with the warmer months. And in terms of my home being commercial or residential, I applied as a residential homeowner. The home itself is, I believe, zoned both. It's a multi-purpose building, or at least the lot is zoned for that. But it's a private residence.
Thank you. There's 2 hands up. So Mr. Geiger.
Okay, I'd recently purchased the home. It's in the historic district, and it's been kind of let go, I think, like Manu, for many years. And there's a lot of projects inside, outside. Is there somebody I could talk to discuss the projects just at a high level before I apply for some of these tax credits?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to put my email in the chat for everyone, because anyone who has specific questions about a project is always welcome to reach out to me, because I know sometimes it sounds like you have a lot of things to attempt and you might want to talk about something.
Yeah, I have a laundry list.
So kind of would add that I have a similar laundry list, and the work that I've done feels like a fraction of what I would love to do for the home. And when I initially reached out to SHPO and was put into contact with my reviewer, I had a telephone conversation with him and, you know, told him about, you know, all the things that I want to do, the aspirational goals that I have for the home, and you know, just sort of talk me through, you know, how that application might look in the coming months, perhaps even coming years. I have a feeling that my home will be always a work in progress, but that's, again, the beauty of home ownership, especially something older. But whoever you get contacted with, I'm pretty confident they'll be able to answer your questions. And if you'd like to reach out to me, I'll be happy to provide at least a soundboard and maybe some mental support for the project. And I can send you my email on a privately, but the SHPO was great in terms of the experience that I had.
Okay, I did make
That's fine.
note of the house you're rebuilding. I figured I would try to reach out to you regardless. So thank you for offering that. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So,
Thank you
how
so
how
much.
should we touch base?
I'm gonna try to do that now separately
Okay.
via mess. You're on Zoom, so I'll just send you a message.
I'll let everybody know, we'll be sending around, all the panelists will have your contact information for the attendees, and so they can also reach out directly. We'll be emailing the PowerPoint and can share contact information then as well.
Sounds good.
I'd also like to say that, that Paul, I have copies of the handouts here for this presentation, which include a sample of the application with instructions. And I can either email you that information, or I can drop off hard copies to your house since you only live down the block. But yeah, also there are web links. I've been getting some questions in my on my phone. There are web links that I have sent out in various emails, and I can send them out. Basically, there are two sections of the SHPO website that talks about the programs. So, and like, frequently asked questions and things like that about both the homeowners and the commercial.
So as Teresa said, this is being recorded, so we will share it, and I will send the link around so that everybody who attended tonight and everybody who, if you know somebody who registered but could not make it, we also have their information and can send it. But then please feel free to forward it, and it will be, we will make the recording available on AARCH's website.
That's fantastic. Erin, thank you so much. This Zoom would not have been possible without you and AARCH. And it was really an excellent suggestion. And we were able to reach so many more people. It was, really a wonderful way of doing it.
Great. Well, thank you, Teresa, for making this happen. And thank you to Francis and to Manu for sharing your wisdom and experience about running the tax credit program and reviewing, and your experience with using it, which I think is so valuable to know that this is such an accessible program. It is meant to be for the homeowner. So
if anyone's interested in talking about projects sooner rather than later, we're definitely available. I put my email in the chat, but we'll certainly circulate my email, my contact information. I'm always happy to talk about projects. I know that it can be kind of overwhelming when you start thinking about rehabbing a historic home and doing your taxes at the same time, but we really try to make this very, very simple. And there are no such thing as stupid questions. So definitely ask away at any time, and we'll make sure that if you want to apply, that you'll have a smooth process. So.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I'm just looking, there's a chat about, oh, I see. So we will be in touch, and thank you all. I think we'll wrap it up with that, and we will be in touch. And my contact information is Erin@aarch.org, which I just put in the chat as well. So look forward to speaking to you all over email when we send out the presentation and the link. And thank you again for being here tonight.
Thank you all. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.